Welcome everybody. I am Eli Biam, Professor Eli Biam from the Technion, and I will host this meeting of the webinar. I wish to say a few words on the webinar before we start. So, welcome to the first webinar of the C2C-CTF-2021, hosted by the Technion. C2C-CTF is a competition of students from 6 different countries that is hosted this year in the Technion. More words about it will be said later. It is organized each year by a different university, this year by the Technion, and under the umbrella of an organization called INCS-COE. And I wish to show you a short video about the competition. Thank you. Registration deadline, as you see, today is the first webinar by Bruce Schneier. Before we continue, I would like to give the microphone to Kazuo Noguchi, the Executive Director of INCS-COE, who will say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome to all competing students and the faculty members and the supporting for C2C-CTF. Many people, I believe, that already have registered, but if you have not, as a student, didn't register yet, please do so. My name is Kazuo Noguchi, Executive Director of INCS-COE, as well as a Senior Researcher of Keio University. First, thank you for the C2C Steering Committee members, all the members working hard at least monthly, and particularly 2021, hosting university leadership of Technion, Eli, Avi, and Susie, and Hiroshi Fujiwara CyberSecurity Research Center, and all sponsors. Thank you all. This is the second year of the 5-year plan. About 3 years ago, we started discussing joint original Cambridge to Cambridge. Actually, Frank is here, that's great, thank you. And we expanded this, the spirits under INCS-COE carried over towards international aspects. And we became a new C2C, which is country to country. We have 5 universities from 5 different countries and different continents, and a 5-year plan. So this is the second year. And the second, INCS-COE has a vision of international collaborations in government, industry, academia framework, recognizing one nation or one company or one university cannot accomplish the international safety, security, and the digital global society. INCS-COE has 4 pillars. international research and the policy. And the third one is education training, which is exactly happening for C2C, among others. And finally, international symposia and workshops. In 2016, we embarked on the loosely coupled membership, more than 25 leading universities in this field, and that became our trusted COE universities. We spread the words to the faculty members to compete, that the students can participate. Third, the purpose of this COE and the C2C is international and practical education and training, aiming for not only technical skills, but also producing ethical hackers, nurturing international friendship and communication and leadership, rather than competing individually among universities against university, nor country against countries. The competition is among international teams. Last year, for instance, there are 31 teams. Perhaps some of you competed last year as well. And there are 155 students competed at the final. Each team had 5 students and distributed to the different schools and the nations so that the 24 hours can cover, and 1 leader was assigned. At least we tried 1 female in the team. The students are originally from 38 countries, from 20 different universities for last year's competition. Finally, as a KO Universities member, I'm part of the KO Universities, and briefly let me touch upon 2023 plan after MIT 2022 next year. So 2 years from now is KO's term. The benefits for the students, actually, particularly in Japan, are tremendous for understanding international realities, working other students together for peace, safe, and secure environment. Hopefully, we can do face-to-face in Japan, including some beautiful cultural events there. Hopefully, pandemic is already kind of stabilized. In fact, we did the kickoff last week. We are so excited about the C2C-CTF 2021 plan, starting today's webinar, inviting, Bruce Schneier. And thank you so much, your commitment and as a participant, as well as the leadership, the Technion team, Ellie, Avi, and Susie. So again, hopefully enjoy as well as we can learn together. Yeah, back to you, Ellie.
Thank you. I would like to say a few words about the Technion. The Technion was founded in 1912, and due to the First World War, it actually started teaching in 1924. Located in Haifa, Israel, in the north of Israel. And it is noted that Professor Albert Einstein was one of the founders of Technion. He was actually the president of the first Technion Society. It's the leading technical university in Israel with 3 Nobel Prizes, and I can say more and more, but I'll skip most of it. I will show you a short video that will show you the area of the Technion and the students. I would like to show you the last video clip for today, which is welcome notes by partner university, as some words about the C2C-CTF that will tell you about why, how, and what we want in this competition, as well as telling some welcome notes by some partner universities.
Several years ago, MIT and Cambridge, Mass, and the University of Cambridge in the UK launched Cambridge to Cambridge, the cybersecurity challenge for our students. We decided to call the competition Cambridge to Cambridge, or C2C. We formed mixed teams combining students from both universities to foster this spirit of cooperation. The first event was held in Cambridge, Mass in 2016. In the following year, it was held at the University of Cambridge, with mixed teams from across the UK and the US. After a break, we decided to broaden the activity further, making it a worldwide competition including students from Japan, the US, the UK, Israel, and Australia, truly spanning the globe. C2C is now country to country, or even continent to continent.
Last year, on the 6th of December 2020, the Information Security Group at Royal Holloway, University of London, hosted the inaugural Capture the Flag competition of the International Cybersecurity Centre of Excellence, INCS-COE, in mixed international teams. Their challenge: to solve cybersecurity-related problems over a marathon 24-hour period by forming effective, highly communicative teams. This event was the first in a 5-year rolling program of country-to-country CTF competitions, inspired by the successful Cambridge to Cambridge event, pioneered by MIT in the USA and the University of Cambridge in the UK.
Participation in the country-to-country challenge not only provides our students an opportunity to showcase and test their cybersecurity skills, more importantly, it gives the students an opportunity to network with their peers across the world.
C2C-CTF provides something that traditional courses and certifications cannot: the opportunity to not only develop your technical skills, but experience the exciting challenge of becoming a member of a truly international team. You'll leave, we hope, with new friends and a new hobby, one which will help you build your professional portfolio and kickstart your career by equipping you to take on the challenge of a rapidly changing landscape in demand of skilled and adaptable cybersecurity professionals. Whether you want to develop your technical skills, meet fellow CTF enthusiasts, or simply take on an exciting new challenge, the C2C-CTF offers a one-of-a-kind experience.
So good luck to all of you who are participating in the challenge, and we look forward to seeing some of you in 2024 when we host this event.
In the US alone, we've seen the SolarWinds attack that penetrated hundreds of global companies and government networks. It's clear that this is a global problem that must be confronted globally, and that means we need to build strong ties amongst all of those of goodwill. C2C is a step in building those ties amongst the next generation of cyber leaders, you. Welcome to the competition and best of luck.
So, after all this introduction, I want to tell you about the competition. Some was already said, so I'll do it quick. C2C is a series of international competitions organized by INC-COE with 5 universities: Royal Holloway in UK, the Technion in Israel, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the USA, Keio University in Japan, and Edith Cowan University in Australia. with co-partners. It's not the full list of partners of this competition. This year, it's organized by the Technion. It's the second C2C in this form. The inaugural C2C was last year in Royal Holloway. Due to the coronavirus, it was remote, though the original intention was to do it in place. And the third one will be hosted by MIT next year, hopefully after the coronavirus will end up. Again, the hosting universities, Royal Holloway hosted it in 2020, Technion in 2021, MIT in 2022, KU University then in 2023, and Edith Cowan University in Australia will do it in 2024. Partners also the University of Cambridge, UMBC, and George Mason University, as well as other universities which are members of the Inc. COE. The goals are to disseminate knowledge among students, which is probably the most important goal, but together with it, we want to make collaborations and networking between the participating students, which, as you already heard, we try to make groups of students in the finals that join together and work together, where several people from several countries with diversity, several genders, and different knowledge will participate together. The management of the competition, we have a steering committee, which you can see the logos of the universities in between, and there's an advisory committee for this year, which also includes the industry, and you can see here Check Point and Intel are participating, along with university people and some students. The sponsors of this year that make everything that we do here possible is Check Point, Intel as gold sponsors, Google as a silver sponsor, and Rafael and IBM as bronze sponsors. We thank them very much because otherwise we would not be able to make this C2C-CTF. It will be web-based. We will use the technology of Fifth Domain, which are also participating in the organization of the competition, contribute questions, and giving us their web-based system to make this competition. Eligibility to participate is for registered students, for enrolled students in universities in the following countries: UK, United Kingdom, Israel, United States, Japan, Australia, and France. Students can be at any level of studies, either undergraduate, master's student, or PhD. And they should be enrolled and study something. We don't count and we don't check if you are a full-time student or part-time student. The selection criteria would be that since you understand that we have a maximum quota, so if we pass the maximum quota for registration or for the finals, we will have to select some of the participants or some of the registrations and not all. We expect that we'll be able to have everybody that is registered. Then we will have qualifiers. After qualifiers, we will select teams of 5 students, which will be diverse, meaning several countries, genders, experiences, and skills that will work together and contribute together for the common goal. We seek for motivated and resourceful participants who enjoy a tough intellectual challenge in a cooperative international context. We don't just look for the best experts, we want also to give them extra networking, extra knowledge, and fun. As part of it, we will have these webinars. Today is the first one. We will notify about the next one at a later time, but the topics may be of various directions, including attractive speakers and subjects, issues related to CTF questions, industry contributions, presentation of the CTF platform, and so on. You can see here the list of topics which cover basically most of the areas of cybersecurity. So we have a few minutes for questions, if anybody wishes for, before we continue to the main talk of this webinar. So if anybody in the audience wishes to ask questions, this is the time. I see a question about the maximal number of students. So we are limited at 500 participants. At this time, it doesn't seem that we will get to this number. If we will get to it, we will have to decide what to do. Part of the webinar was to give you some information on how to prepare to the competition. We hope to be able to do it in one of the next webinars, and we intended to distribute some material on the website. It will take us some more time to do it. So we will work on it, and hopefully we will be able to distribute some material. So Bruce Schneier, the next speaker, the main speaker of this event, is a well-known participant in the crypto and security communities for various contributions, including his very well-known book, Applied Cryptography, which is probably the most widespread book in this area. And I believe that it sold more copies than the next 10 in the list together. So it's a very important book for the community. And he wrote many, many other books, which I will not list here. Also academic papers. His website and newsletter, Cryptogram and Schneier on Security, are highly influential. And I can list here too many other contributions than I will do now. Personally, I know him for about 30 years. We even have a paper together. And on the other hand, we also competed against each other in the advanced encryption standard competition. So I could see him from both cooperation and competence. And in both cases, it was highly interested to work with him or against him. So it is a pleasure to invite him. It was a pleasure to invite him to talk in this webinar about securing a world of physically capable computers.
Thanks, Ellie. It is nice seeing you, even remotely. I wish we all could be together, and maybe next year. And yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. Since you showed up, what, in the late 90s. It has been a bunch of fun years. So I want to talk about, the title is Securing a World of Physically Capable Computers. I want to talk about, I guess, the world of the Internet of Things, a world where everything is becoming a computer, because that's really where we are today. We're creating a world where everything is a computer. So this, which I just grabbed, is a small portable computer that happens to make phone calls. And similarly, your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. And a microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. But your car is a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. Actually, it's a 100+ computer distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. So, and this is what the world is becoming, right? It's more than the internet. It's more than the Internet of Things. It's this pervasive computing connected world in which things are attached to. And it means a bunch of things for internet security. Right? Internet security becomes everything security. And all of the lessons from our world of internet security become relevant to everything everywhere. So I want to start with 6 lessons from our world of computer security, which are now broadly applicable. As some of these will be familiar, some of these will be newer. The first is that most software is poorly written and insecure. Right? We know this is true, but it's worth talking about the reasons. And it's basically economic. Right? We don't want to pay for quality software. I've heard the joke first about restaurants, good, fast, cheap, pick any two. It also works for software. And generally the market rewards fast and cheap, or really fast, cheap, and feature rich over security. Poor software is full of bugs. Some of those bugs are security vulnerabilities. Some of those are exploitable. Some of those are exploited, which is why pretty much all the software we encounter has security vulnerabilities. Second lesson is that we never designed the internet with security in mind. Now, this seems kind of crazy when I say it today, but if you go back to the early years, early decades of the internet, there were 2 things true. One, it wasn't used for anything important ever. And 2, you had to be a member of a research institution to get access to it in the first place. And for those 2 reasons, the designers of the internet deliberately ignored security in their protocols and assumed that the endpoints would take care of it. Now, of course, back then, the endpoints were large mainframes that had security. Fast forward a decade, and we start connecting single user personal computers that had no security because they were never designed to be networked, connecting them to a network that was never designed to accept those sorts of machines. And here we are in the internet today. And we're still living with the effects of those decisions in the domain name system, the routing system, packet security, email addresses, and on and on and on. The third lesson is that the extensibility of computerized systems means that anything can be used against us. Now, extensibility is an important property of computers that normal things don't have. It basically means you can't constrain the functionality of a computerized device because it can run software. When I was a kid, I had a telephone at home, big black thing attached to the wall with a cord, great device, couldn't ever be anything other than a telephone. This is a computer that makes phone calls. It can do whatever you want. And if you remember Apple's first slogan for the iPhone, there's an app for that. Now, you can download new functionality on this device. Anybody can. And that means a bunch of things for security. It's hard to test because you can't anticipate every use condition. You can't anticipate every feature. And someone can download features onto your phone. Someone drops malware on this device, they're adding features. I didn't ask for them, I don't want them, but they're changing the functionality of this device because it is extensible. So now we live in a world where refrigerators can send spam and cars can receive ransomware because they're extensible. The fourth lesson is that the complexity of computerized systems makes attack easier than defense. So complexity is the worst enemy of security for a whole bunch of reasons. You can think of it in terms of the attack surface. You can think of it in terms of the attacker getting to choose the time, place, and nature of the attack, and the defender having to defend against all possible attacks. But for whatever reasons, offense is easier. And you see this in the cyber realm right now. Attack is easier than defense. Fifth lesson is that there are new vulnerabilities in the interconnections. As we connect things to each other, vulnerabilities in one thing affect other things. Right? Lots of examples of this. 2016, The dying botnet, right? Vulnerabilities in DVRs and CCTV cameras allowed hackers to launch massive DDoS attacks. 2013, Target Corporation hacked by someone stealing credentials from their HVAC contractor in several mid-Pennsylvania stores. Right? SolarWinds last December, right? Attackers going after a piece of network management software. Actually, even worse, the update process of a piece of network management software, allowing them to infiltrate hundreds of networks. Or in January, right, China using vulnerabilities in Office 360 to attack whole bunches of companies. Right, so there's a lot of interconnections here. And there are weird ones. Those are kind of obvious. There are vulnerabilities that are hard to fix because no one's actually at fault. We've seen examples of two secure systems. You put them together and you get insecurity out of it. I mean, there was a PGP vulnerability that wasn't really a PGP vulnerability, but it was the way PGP interacted with certain mail software. There was an email address vulnerability in Google and Netflix a few years ago that made use of the fact that in Gmail, the periods don't matter in your email address, right? So Bruce Schneier at gmail.com is the exact same address as Bruce.Schneier or b.r.u.c, right? Google just strips out the dots in your name, your email address. Well, there are sites that treat those as different email addresses, and there are attacks you can do based on that differential. Now, who's at fault there? Kind of nobody. It's an insecurity that emerges from two secure systems. And the last lesson is that attacks always get easier, better, and faster. Right? Some of this are just computers. Computers get faster, Moore's law. A password that was secure 10 years ago might be insecure today, not because we've gotten better at password guessing, we've just gotten faster at it. But we also get better at a lot of things, right? Attackers get smarter, attackers adapt. And there are arms races between attacks and defense, spam, anti-spam, deepfake detection. And expertise flows downhill. What today might be top secret NSA program, tomorrow might be a PhD thesis, and the next day, a hacking tool. And that flow can happen within 6 months. But attackers are always improving. So up to now, this has all been a manageable problem. I mean, none of these trends are new, but really for a confluence of reasons, we're reaching a crisis. And the three things I want to point to are automation, autonomy, and physical agency. Those things bring new dangers. Like the fact that computers are affecting the world in a direct physical manner. And so traditionally, in computer security, something called the CIA triad, which are the three properties we are supposed to provide: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Normally, we're concerned with the confidentiality. And when you see a computer security story in the news, it's usually a confidentiality story, right? Privacy, data theft, data misuse. This is Equifax, Target hack, the OPM hack, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, Russia and SolarWinds, China and Office 360. These are all confidentiality attacks. But the threats do come in many forms. Right? There are availability threats. DDoS attacks, ransomware. Colonial Pipeline is an availability threat. Actually, it's both. Right? There was ransomware. The company couldn't get at their systems. And then also data was stolen and threatened to publish. So you had confidentiality and availability. But traditional ransomware is availability. DDoS is availability. No one stole your data. You just can't get access to your computers and resources. There are integrity threats. If I hack a bank and manipulate bank balances, I'm not stealing any data, but I'm changing the integrity of the database. And today, the integrity and availability threats are much worse than the confidentiality threats because the effects are much greater. There are real risks to life and property. For the Colonial Pipeline, the real risk to the nation was that the oil wasn't moving. not that their private data was exposed. Right? So I'm concerned if someone hacks a hospital and steals my confidential medical records, but I'm much more concerned if they change my blood type. I don't want someone to hack my car and turn on the Bluetooth microphone, eavesdrop on my conversations, but I'm much more concerned if they remotely disable the brakes. The hospital example is an integrity attack. The car example is an availability attack. When you think about cars, medical devices, drones, weapon systems, thermostats, power plants, smart city systems, military systems, the availability and integrity threats are suddenly much worse. And we're concerned about ransomware of pipelines, DDoS attacks against your car. But there's a fundamental difference between your spreadsheet crashes and you lose your data, and your pacemaker crashes and you lose your life. And it could be the exact same CPU and operating system and vulnerability and exploit, an attack tool, and attack. The only thing different is what the computer can do and what it's attached to. And this becomes even more dangerous as our systems become more critical. So I have a seventh lesson to add, that computers fail differently. Right? So we know how normal things fail. You think about cars. Cars have parts. These parts have some mean time between failures. And there is an entire ecosystem of auto repair facilities in each of our communities to handle the steady stream of cars that break over the course of a year, over the course of the lifetime of the vehicle. Computers don't fail that way. Computers all work perfectly until one day when none of them do. But they fail as a group. So there's an interesting story of Amity locks. So Amity makes keyless hotel entry systems. So if you go to a hotel and you get a card, you wave it in front of a reader and the door opens. One of the companies that makes those locks is Amity. And so Amity, they had several years ago a vulnerability in one of their lock systems. Basically allowed anybody to break into any hotel room if they were able to do some pretty simple hacking. So how does Amity fix that? How do hotels fix that? Now, hotels have a system to deal with broken locks. I'm going to make it up. They have a locksmith on call who they bring in, within an hour, who changes the lock, rehangs the door, fixes the jam, does whatever they'd have to do to fix locks. The hotel does not have a system for all 500 hotel rooms in our hotel need their lock fixed. Because the way you patch this Amity vulnerability is you went to each lock manually. You couldn't patch it remotely. You couldn't patch it as a group. Which means in most cases, the vulnerability never got fixed. Because the way the computers failed was not the way that the owners were able to deal with it. And we are worried when we think about these failures about crashing all the cars, or maybe all the cars of one make and one model year, or shutting down all the power plants. These bulk attacks against many systems. So those are my lessons. At the same time this is happening, some of our long-standing security paradigms are failing. I'm going to talk about three of them. The first one is patching. Patching isn't really working well anymore. So our computers, our phones, they're as secure as they are for two basic reasons. The first is that there are engineers at Microsoft, Apple, and Google that do their best to design them to be secure in the first place. And the second is that team of engineers are able to quickly develop and deliver security patches when someone discovers a vulnerability. Right? We aren't able to design secure software out of the box. So instead, we are agile and we patch things quickly. That works. Works for our computers, works for our phones. Patch Tuesday was yesterday on Windows. This isn't true for low-cost embedded systems like DVRs, home routers. They're built at a much lower profit margin, often built offshore by third parties, ad hoc teams come together, design them, build them, and then disperse. They don't have standing security teams associated with those devices who can write those patches. Even worse, a lot of those devices aren't patchable at all. There's no way to patch the software or the firmware. Today, the way you patch your home router is you throw it away and buy a new one. That's the patch mechanism. Right? And if you think about it, we also actually do get security from the fact that we cycle our devices pretty quickly. Right? Our laptops, our phones last a few years, and then we get new ones. And every version of the iPhone has more security than the previous version. Every version of Windows, of the hardware, has more security. Right? All these systems. But we don't have that same life cycle for these embedded systems. You buy a DVR, you're going to replace it about every 5 to 10 years. You're going to replace your refrigerator every 25 years. I bought a new home thermostat a few years ago. I expect to replace it approximately never. And these things last a long time. And if you sort of think about a car, let's say you buy a car today, you drive it for 10 years, sell it. Someone else buys it. They drive for 10 years, they sell it. At this point, someone else buys it, put on a boat in the US, probably sent to Latin America somewhere, Europe sent to Africa somewhere. Someone else buys it, they drive another 10 to 20 years. Right? So you try to find a computer from 1981. Try to boot it up, try to make it secure. We have no idea how to maintain 40-year-old consumer software. We haven't a clue. But there is a reason that Microsoft and Apple depreciate their operating systems after a couple of generations. Maintaining the old stuff is hard. And cars are at least possible. You can imagine a car company maintaining a test bed of 40 years times 20 models and actually doing the testing. You go to low-cost consumer devices, and that's just not possible. The engineers aren't there. The companies are going out of business. The price point of the devices is just too low for that to happen. So I think we're going to start seeing some real fraying and patching as we move to these new embedded systems. The second thing that's starting to fail is authentication. And I see Frank listening to me, and he's known this more than anybody else. The kind of passwords only just barely worked ever. Right? Human memorizable passwords no longer work in a lot of situations. Two-factor isn't suitable for a lot of situations. Backup authentication systems are terrible. They're often worse than the primaries. The thing that's happening is the amount of authenticating we're going to do is about to explode exponentially. So when you authenticate, it's usually one of two things. I'm not going to demonstrate that. All right, so I'm going to log onto my phone. I use my face, it uses Face ID, and I just check my email. So that was me authenticating to a device, and then me authenticating to a remote service. And if you saw, they both worked pretty well. But what we're going to see the rise of is thing-to-thing authentication. Now, the Internet of Things, 5G, is not about you watching Netflix faster. It's about things talking to things behind your back. And they're going to have to authenticate to each other. Now, if you have, 100 IoT devices on your person, you need to talk to each other. Right? That's 10,000 authentications. You have 1,000 devices, it's 1,000,000 authentications. We don't know how to do that. We can do a little bit of it. I mean, right now, when I get into my car, this device automatically authenticates and uses the car's microphone and speakers. Right? That's Bluetooth. That works. But if you think about Bluetooth, I set it up manually. I have to manually pair my phone and my car. That's not going to scale to 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 pairings. But also, if you have an IoT anything, you likely control it from your phone. This has become the de facto IoT controller hub. Again, works for 10, for 20 things, not for 1,000 things. We don't know how to do that kind of authentication at scale. Or ad hoc. I mean, I think about a mature driverless car environment that each car will have to authenticate in real time to thousands of other cars and road signs and traffic signals and emergency alerts. On demand in real time, we don't know how to do that. So I think we'd have some serious authentication problems in the coming years. The third thing that's failing is supply chain. And you all know the supply chain problems. I want to tell you that's an insurmountably hard problem to solve. And so, I mean, a few things in the news. Last year, it was all about Huawei, ZTE. In the United States, should we trust Chinese-made networking equipment? A couple of years before that, it was about Kaspersky. Should we trust Russian-made antivirus equipment? This is not just a US problem, of course. 2014, China banned Kaspersky and also Symantec because they didn't trust an Israeli security company. 2017, India banned a bunch of Chinese smartphone apps. 1997, there was debate in the United States about Checkpoint. So this is an important question, right? Can you trust technology from a country whose government you don't trust? It's a hard question, it's a good question, but it's just the beginning of the problem, right? This is a US product, but it's not made in the US. Its chips aren't fabbed in the US. Its programmers carry, what, 100 different passports? And all of those are places to slip in backdoors. We've seen backdoors discovered in Juniper firewalls, in D-Link routers. 2003, this is worth looking up, is a really clever backdoor that almost just barely made it into Linux. Didn't make it in the end. Someone noticed it. We got really lucky. There's more. You have to just trust the development process. Lots of hacked software libraries. You have to trust the distribution mechanism. We've seen fake apps in the Google Play Store. You have to trust the update mechanism. Like Russia hacked the SolarWinds update process. Actually, Russia likes using the update process. NotPetya was distributed through a fake update of a popular Ukrainian accounting package. The NSA gets in this game too. They installed backdoors into Cisco equipment destined for the Syrian telephone company. That's the shipping process. I saw a paper a few years ago at, I think, Ches. You can hack an iPhone with a malicious replacement screen. And this is hard to solve, right? You can't trust anyone, yet you have to trust everyone. So really a series of stories from Bloomberg, first in 2018, and then I think late last year, earlier this year, about malicious chips on motherboards built in China, destined for cloud servers everywhere. Complicated series of stories, lots of data, totally uncorroborated. But this is Bloomberg. This is not someone who we don't trust as journalists. And the fact that we can't even verify that story or not shows how hard this is. And we have no good answer here. You can imagine a US-only iPhone, it'll cost 10 times as much, no one will buy it. We are deeply, deeply international in our supply chain. So this is a perfect storm, right? Security is failing, just everything is going to be connected. And you know, we've been okay with an unregulated tech space because it didn't matter. And this is no longer sustainable. And so primarily, I think this is a policy problem. And getting the policy right is critical. Law and tech have to work together. To me, this is the most important lesson of Edward Snowden. We knew how technology could subvert law. He showed how law subverts technology. And both have to work together or neither work. So this is what I wrote about in my latest book on IoT security, the awesome title of Click Here to Kill Everybody. And I spend a lot of time on policy here, not on tech. Standards, regulations, liabilities, international agreements. So I think that's really where we have to do work. And I want to sort of highlight three different principles. First one is policy. And that is defense has to dominate. Well, I can think of it as one world, one network, one answer. Gone are the days when any nation could defend their stuff and attack other countries' stuff. And everyone is using the same stuff. We all use TCP/IP and PDF files, right, and Microsoft Word and iPhones. And either everyone gets security or no one gets security. And either everyone gets to spy or no one gets to spy. And you can't build an iPhone that only allows the police to eavesdrop and not the criminals. And you can't have a world of poor BGP security so that the US can do traffic shaping and eavesdrop on enemies without also allowing China to do the same thing. And again, we have to design for security and not surveillance. I think that's an important principle, especially as these systems start being used for critical applications. We can't keep them insecure. The tech principle is to build in resilience, or to assume insecurity in design systems that work anyway. And whether it's defense in depth, compartmentalization, avoiding single points of failure, ways to fail safe, fail secure, removing functionality, deleting data, systems that monitor each other, lots of examples of this, of ways to build more resilient systems. And I think there actually is a research question here that's real important, that in some ways rivals the internet. But the internet was created to answer this question. Can we build a reliable network out of unreliable parts in an unreliable world? I have a similar question. Can we build a secure network out of insecure parts in an insecure world? The answer isn't obviously yes, but it's not obviously no either. And I think we need to think about how we could do that, because that's the world we're going to be in. And then finally, an economic principle, right, to build in security incentives. So SolarWinds is an interesting story. SolarWinds is a private company, and it's owned primarily by a private equity firm. Toma Brava, a Brazilian billionaire, owns it. And the way private equity firms tend to work is they buy up companies with existing customer bases, pretty big, that are sticky, that is hard to switch. And then they take those companies and make the products as lousy as they can get away with without losing customers. They drastically cut costs. So what SolarWinds did, because their financial people demanded it, is they reduced their security, because that was something customers couldn't see, and kind of secretly pushed the risk off to their customers. And that is the economic incentives that are in play today. Not making things as secure as you can, making things as insecure as you can. And this is not an anomaly. And this is why banking websites are insecure. This is why phones are vulnerable to SIM swapping attacks. This is why Facebook and everyone else does such a lousy job of removing hate and misinformation. This is why IoT devices are so insecure. The market rewards insecurity in every one of those cases. We need to fix that, and the obvious way is to raise the cost of insecurity, thereby incenting companies to be more secure. And this in turn spurs innovation in security. So those are my three principles. The real question is how to get from here to there. And fundamentally, markets can't solve this. Markets are short-term and profit motivated at the expense of society. They're not going to solve the collective action problems we have. The missing link here is government. Government is how we solve collective action problems. It's how we act collectively as citizens rather than individually as consumers. Of course, there are problems here, lots of problems with government involvement in tech. It's really hard for governments to be proactive about anything. Regulatory capture is a thing, especially. when the thing being regulated is complex and technical. And there's this real problem of security versus safety, the difference between a static safety environment and an intelligent and adaptive human adversary. Then how to regulate security in a fast-moving, fast-changing tech environment. So the devil is in the details here. I don't actually have the details, but I know the alternative is not viable any longer. Because here's the thing, governments will get involved regardless. The stakes are too great and the risks are too high. Government is already involved in physical systems, cars, planes, consumer goods. The physical threats of the IoT is already spurring some government action. So our choice isn't between government involvement and no government involvement. It's between smart government involvement and stupid government involvement. So I think we need to think about this now, both the pros and the cons, so we're not surprised. Right? And regulation, if done well, incents private industry. I think it's a pervasive myth, especially in Silicon Valley, that regulation stifles innovation. It's a threat you hear about all the time. I think it's largely a myth. We've heard about it with the restaurant sanitation codes, automobile safety regulations. There's no actual evidence it's true. And if you do it right, regulation spurs innovation because it creates a marketplace for security ideas which don't exist today. There's lots of good security tech that we're not getting deployed because the market doesn't reward it. Change the market incentives and suddenly those technical improvements are rewarded. So Europe is moving in this direction. Europe is right now the regulatory superpower on the planet. Right? GDPR is an enormous regulation for privacy. They're working on one for AI. They're working on one for the Internet of Things. In the United States, states are leading the way, specifically California, New York, Massachusetts. California has a data protection law modeled after GDPR. California has an IoT security law. New York is regulating cryptocurrencies. Massachusetts has a right to repair law. I mean, these states are looking at regulation in this space. In the US also, existing federal agencies are starting to get in on the act. And in the US, Congress will follow last, and they'll follow because of fear. But I think the international considerations are interesting because software is write once, sell everywhere. So today, the car I buy in the US is not the same car I can buy in Mexico. Environmental laws are different, and if manufacturers choose how to tune their engines based on local law. But this Facebook I get in the US is exactly the same Facebook everyone gets in the world. Because it is just easier to do that. So California passed an IoT security law. One of the provisions is no default passwords. So imagine a maker of a thermostat. They have to fix their software to sell it in California. They're not going to make another version to sell everywhere else in the US, anywhere else in the world. But we all benefit from a California law. And similarly, a few years ago when I worked for IBM, they announced that they were going to implement GDPR worldwide because it was easier to do that than to figure out who is a European citizen. A good regulation in a large enough market moves the entire planet. And we are starting to see that, and that's real interesting. And again, I don't see any alternatives. There hasn't been an industry in the past 150 years that has improved safety or security without being forced to by government. Cars, planes, pharmaceuticals, food production, medical devices, restaurants, consumer goods, workplace conditions. Most recently in the US, financial products. Again and again, companies skimp on safety and security because the market doesn't reward it. And to fix that, you need to change the market incentives, and that's what regulation does. So for us right now, technologists need to get involved in policy. as internet security becomes everything security, internet security technology becomes more important to overall security policy. And all the security policy issues that we will face will have strong tech components. And we will never get the policy right if policymakers get the technology wrong. In the US, we see that in the going dark debate. The notion that the FBI wants companies like Apple to make their devices less secure so they can get access to them. We see this in the vulnerability equities debate. When should a government hoard a vulnerability for offensive use versus just tell the manufacturer so it gets patched and use it in defense? Or what to do about voting machines or driverless car security. And if you watch these debates unfold, you see policymakers and technologists talking past each other. And we have to fix this. And it's really our job. Technologists need to get involved in policy discussions, right? In government agencies, on legislative staffs, at NGOs, as part of the press. It's bigger than security, but it's real important. We need to build a world where tech policy is informed by tech reality. And that's not going to happen if we are not in the room when the policy is formed. So at that, I'm happy to stop and take questions or comments or any type of chat. I know we are all everywhere, but it's, it's a little more fun when we are talking to each other. Of course, half of you have your cameras off, so who knows if you're actually there. I see a sleeping cat. I see Ellie showing up.
I've got a question.
All right.
Thanks very much for the talk, Bruce. So my question is, on your point that the market does not encourage integration of security, would you not think that the increase in the sort of frequency and impact of cyber attacks, especially ransomware attacks, over sort of the last couple of years has sort of made it more of a priority for business leaders to incorporate that without the sort of government intervention?
Some, but not a lot. If you sort of think of the incentive, your ransomware attacks happen a lot, but they don't happen to you very often. And it's just like any kind of variable risk, it is probably worth it for you to take the chance, right? Because if you you spend the money and nothing happens, you didn't make your numbers for the year, and that's really bad. You don't spend the money and something happens, that's bad. But if you don't spend the money, nothing happens, that's really good. You actually are incented to underspend and take the chance, the way you are rewarded in the marketplace. We also know that a stock price tends not to be affected by cyber attacks. There are short-term blips, they tend to be corrected within a couple of months. So we just don't have the real incentives. So you are, I don't know, a CISO, and you go up to your CEO and say, I want to spend all this money on security because we're vulnerable, ransomware, you see it in the news all the times. If we get attacked, we need this. And your boss looks at you and says, we didn't have this stuff last month that we weren't attacked, so why won't we be equally lucky next month? And this is always a problem with variable risks. And this is really why there is an insurance market, to turn variable risks into fixed costs, which are much easier to budget. So you see a little bit of lip service paid and some more security, but generally no, you will not see an increase in security spending in fuel infrastructure in the United States because of the Colonial Pipeline. You won't. Everyone will breathe a sigh of relief and say, wow, I'm glad that it wasn't me, and go on about their day.
Thanks.
I see you, Frank, unless you were just doing exercise.
Hi, Bruce. No, yes. I really loved your talk. I have you're talking about the big picture, and I have a big picture question. And that is, technology is monstrously complicated. And as you know, my job is to give people PhDs in computer security. And people with computer security PhDs don't understand all the details of technology, as evidenced by all the things you said. Imagine users. Of course, users have no chance of understanding, and also they don't want to understand. They have no interest in it. Now, but they still pay for the products, and they trust that the products are secure because they've been made by experts. Of course, they're not, as you made the point. So, who will defend the users? Because even if we have good-minded technologists who actually build the things, as you told us, their bosses will tell them, "Oh, make it cheap. Don't waste your time on doing that." Who will defend the users?
So this to me is where government steps in. I mean, who defends the users, the consumers, the public against, pajamas that catch on fire, or pharmaceuticals that don't work as advertised, or home appliances that malfunction, or airplanes that aren't terribly safe. I mean, these are all areas where there's a lot of specialized expertise, and the defense of people comes from government. And this is how we manage in a technological society. And, when I walk on an airplane, and I did walk on an airplane recently, it's kind of exciting. Right, I didn't have to worry at all about aircraft maintenance, crew rest, training, safety, any of that. I could walk on blithely ignorant, but anything about how aircraft work and how they are made to be safe, because the government kind of handles that for me. And that works in so many areas of society. It has to work that way in computers as well. Now, the other point you made, where I thought you were going, I think is also a good point, is you're right. A lot of the specialized computer science students that we generate don't have this broad expertise. And I think we need to do a lot of work in our curriculums to, the phrase is public interest tech, to teach the broader policy implications of the tech we're building. I mean, gone are the days when technologists were able to sort of build the world as they saw fit because of the way the tech works. Everything we do has strong policy implications. I think we need to understand them. And whether we're building a new social network or an Internet of Things device, how it fits in society matters a lot. And we cannot ignore that. We kind of know that in security, because security has always involved people. But context is really important. And I don't think we teach enough context, either the undergraduate or the graduate level. And we need more of that.
Thank you.
In that case.
So I totally can't read the chat because it's a too tiny print. All right, someone asked if the slides would be shared afterward. There were no slides. So the answer is no, or yes. Here, you have the slides. So someone asked about educating children about security in schools, and this is an interesting question. Security details change so much. So I think giving kids a sort of good intuitions about how the internet works and how data moves is important. I think they get a lot of that sort of from their peers. And kids are way more savvy about security than you think they are. And when you notice they're not doing it well, it's because their threat model is different and you don't get their threat model. That's basically tends to be true. They're not concerned about companies, they're concerned about their parents. They're concerned about their fellow students. That's their teachers. That's their threat model. So you know how to do this. You are all in this field. Whenever you see kids doing something weird, just try to figure out what their threat model is, and that will likely explain their actions. So I do think we need to teach some things, but I tend to think of user education as a crutch the industry uses to cover over bad design. And you see that in the advice we give people, right? Don't click on attachments. But what should you do with them? They're attachments, right? Don't stick a USB stick in your computer. They're USB sticks. They have no other purpose. I mean, it's the design. It's the fact that a unknown USB stick can be harmful That's the problem. Right? The fact that an attachment can harm your computer, that's the problem. It is not that the user shouldn't do the obvious thing you should do with the thing. Is that the design is so terrible. So I tend to not like, I want computers to be intuitive, and I want the intuitive things to be secure. And that's a much better way to build our systems than to have all those non-intuitive things we have to teach people. Right? Don't click on URLs. It's a URL. What am I supposed to do with it? Read it?
As for the previous question, you said that the government should protect us. And clearly, the question is, how do you force governments to protect us? Because they don't. Actually,
know, right?
they not only don't protect us, they have a different view of security from us, and they define it differently. The defense agencies define it differently than me, and probably me and you define security differently. So how do we force them to help us and protect us? And what should they do at all?
Yeah, so I don't think this changes unless it becomes a political issue. This needs to be an issue that people campaign on. Now, the Internet of Things might force this. So we'll see, right? Now, President Biden has his new executive order on cybersecurity. Now, it didn't come out because of the Colonial Pipeline. The executive order was in the works for months before then, but that gave them the political cover to do it. And those kind of events do give politicians impetus for change. I agree with you. It's hard to imagine, at least especially in the US, there to be a law. I mean, I need a law that the industry doesn't like, right? That the lobbyists can't stop. That's one reason the states have an easier job. It's harder to lobby in the US state governments than the national government. I think it's why EU has an easier job. The way EU works, lobbying is just less powerful. But yeah, you're right. But this is a bigger problem than cybersecurity. In the United States, we are politically dysfunctional in many, many ways. But I don't think this changes until it becomes politics. I mean, there really hasn't been a US election where cybersecurity was a political issue. Occasionally you saw presidential debate questions on it, but not a political issue. Has to become that. But I think when it starts moving to critical infrastructure and actual life and death, then it changes. So we'll see. But Ellie, I actually share your worry that this is really hard to be political. Although some of the agencies are trying to do the right thing. The United States, the Federal Trade Commission is, the FAA is for airplanes, the DOT is for cars, the FDA for medical devices. So we are seeing some good movement. But you're right, there's a lot of government that wants things to be insecure. I think that's just going to become non-viable in the coming decade.
Okay, I have a question. Hello.
Okay, I'll have you first, and I'll do Blair's question from the chat.
Okay, so I have a question about IoT devices certification. You know that now we launched, European Union launched a CyberSecurity Act in 2019, and it will apply fully on June of 2029, so this year. And they propose to certificate all devices, products, IoT products, maximum for 5 years. And what do you think, it will increase security or decrease? Yeah. And one more comment that I think that it could be decreased, because I talked to the people from industry business, and they say, oh, we have already certificate for these devices, and now we got new vulnerability, but we already paid money. Why we should pay again and get new certificate if we have this for 5 years and we can continue to use? So what do you think about this?
Yeah, certification has its place. I think it's important, but I think you rightly point out one of the problems. Certification tends to be for static things. You get the car make and model certified, and that's the car you're selling for the year. It works less well for software that we're updating it every 2 weeks. And so in the US, the FDA is dealing with this right now with medical devices because they have the same problem. You'd certify your MRI scanner, and Microsoft has a new patch and you couldn't install the patch because you'd lose your certification. And that, of course, is a disaster. And the FDA did come up with rules about ways you can install patches to fix things without losing your certification, or allowing the security to improve. So we're going to have to figure it out. I know that Consumer Reports, which is a private, it's a company, but it's not a for-profit corporation, that does safety and reliability certification of devices, of things. You know, like appliances, they'll do energy efficiency, reliability, do it for cars. They are starting to do security for software. And they're going to figure out how to deal with ever-changing software. I think that's important, but you're right. You have to really think about how it works, because software changes so fast, and we want that agility. That agility is important. So how do we keep the agility by also using the certification as a stick to get companies to improve? You see, the federal government's going to do in the United States right now. So the new Biden executive order talks about standards that companies have to meet in order to sell software to the federal government. And so that's basically a certification program. And how that works is going to be interesting to watch. And will it improve things, or will it not? You have to do it right, but I think it's really worth thinking about. All right, so there are a few things in the chat I want to get to. One first one is about ransomware. Should companies pay them? Right? Should it be legally illegal? So ransoms is entirely a collective action problem, right? Or just take basic kidnappings, regular ransoms. We as society are better off if no one pays the ransom, because if you do that, there is no market in kidnapping, and kidnappers stop doing it because they can't make any money. However, when it is your child, you want to pay the ransom, right? So everyone wants for it to be a rule against paying ransoms, but for them themselves to be the exception. The only way to solve this is to prohibit ransom pay. Now, that is hard to do. There are companies that offer ransomware recovery services that pay the ransom without telling without telling anybody. They basically allow companies to whitewash ransom payments by having a deniability. But we would be better off if we can get no one to pay the ransom, because then the ransomware makers would stop. The only reason they do this is because it's profitable. Because the other way to solve this is to get rid of cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies make ransom payments possible. Because if you had to use Visa or a bank transfer, government could quickly shut off ransomware payments, or shut up all payments to ransomware gangs. But the anonymous peer-to-peer currency just makes that possible. I see two more questions. What top 3 initiatives? Gads, I'm always terrible at those questions. I'm going to duck that. Last one is from Corey. So about acknowledging security as a public good. I mean, that's really, I think, a nice way of thinking about it. That security is, especially because we're all interconnected. So if you think about, I don't know, the Dyn botnet, it was vulnerabilities in home routers and DVRs and consumer equipment, right, that allowed the botnet writer to create the botnet and attack a domain name system. Right? So in a sense, the security of my router that's across the room affects the country, affects national security. So you do have this sort of public good problem. because of the interconnections. And thinking about it in some ways, I think makes a lot of sense. Now, what that means, again, I think I said before, the devil's in the details. But I think that is a good way of thinking of it. Another question, do you think cryptocurrency? Oh God, no. So cryptocurrencies are like incredibly insecure and stupid. Don't ever use one. A financial vehicle by which if you forget your password, you lose your life savings will never be a secure system. I did an essay on this. Just type Bruce Schneier blockchain into Google, you'll find it. But no, I mean, cryptocurrencies, I think will be regulated out of existence within a few years. They are an absolute disaster. They have no redeeming qualities. They don't provide any more security, any more safety, any more reliability. Their only real value, unfortunately, is fueling crime. And that's sad, but it is true.
Okay, so thank you, Bruce. It was a great talk. And we
next year in person, right?
Sorry?
Next year in person?
Hopefully sometime. I didn't see.
Okay, where? You saw the list. Where are we going to be next year? I didn't write it down.
Sorry?
Where is next year going to be?
MIT.
I saw there was a list. Where?
MIT.
All right. Well, that's actually down the block for me. That isn't fun.
But it's far away for me.
All right, I'll take you to dinner.
Anywhere for us together must be far away for somebody. But I'll be happy to see you sometime again.
Bye all.
Thank you very much again.
This is fun. I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Thank you very much again. It was a great talk.